Hey everybody, in this video we're going to look at some late romantic musical features found in Wagner's Prelude to the opera Tristan and Isolde, which he would have called a music drama. First thing we need to do is just listen to it. We'll do about the first 24 bars or so. Okay, so let's take a look at some of this. First, this is music of unrequited love, so we don't hear the tonic arrivals, and this will go on for literally over 3 hours, this kind of waiting for the tonic, waiting for the moment, waiting for the cadence, waiting for the arrival harmonically, which is not going to happen for quite a while. And as we're looking through here and looking for late romantic features, we see many, many things. So let me give you a few of them. First off, we see this, I put in red here the harmonic analysis, and in green is the lead sheet analysis. Hopefully it's looking that way on your screen. And then the orange is the indication of the non-chord tones. So we see at the beginning we're in the key of A minor, and then we have this first half cadence with no tonic triad coming, and then we go to C minor, and then modulate quickly to E minor on the third repetition of the material. So the first thing we can notice is the chromatic mediant relationships between the keys. So A to C minor is a chromatic mediant relationship. C minor to E minor is a chromatic mediant relationship, and so on. And we'll have other chromatic mediant relationships throughout the piece. But this is one feature of this late romantic music that we've noticed is these chromatic mediants, which is displayed here in the opening. Also, we can see an extended tertian chord in here, we see this 5-9 chord right here. This A minor, it's got an E9 chord with a non-chord tone to start off the bar, but when we hit this F sharp, it's part of the chord. So we have this extended tertian sonority, which is going to become more and more common into the 20th century, and jazz really takes this idea and runs with it. But we see it in the late 1800s. And this piece was written in 1859, 1857, 8 and 9, somewhere in there. We also can see ambiguous chords in here. If you watched the video of the Tristan chord, this Tristan chord is a very ambiguous chord. A lot of times these chords are difficult to decide on what they are because they're so disguised and ornamented by the composer. In this case, we had what appeared to be aurally F half diminished chord, F, A flat, C flat, E flat, when the voices all arrive. But it turns out not to be that. The ambiguity here is that the A is the actual chord tone rather than the G sharp, which makes this harmony French augmented 6-5. But we have this throughout this piece where we have this ambiguous chords that could be interpreted more than one way. Or maybe your ear thinks of it as one thing and then all of a sudden it's something else. Also in here we have unresolved dominance, and you'll see that all over. If we just scan through the harmonic analysis, we have a 5 chord here with no tonic, 5-7 here with no tonic, we have 5-7 here, 5-7 here, no tonics. We're back to A minor, we have a 5-7, no tonic. We're in G, we've got 5 chord, no tonic. We finally do get a little bit of a tonic in the middle of the bar, but you can't even tell that it resolved hardly because it's in the middle of a phrase and it's a dual function chord taking us to the key of C major, which doesn't last very long. So we have all these 5 chords without resolutions, and the first resolution we really had was here at the end of our little excerpt, and even it was disguised by these non-chord tones, these retardations and so forth. And so this music is marked by this feature of these dominant chords that don't resolve to tonic. So it keeps the music ambiguous as to any kind of finality, and it keeps propelling the music forward as you move from key to key without having any sort of closure. Next feature of late Romanticism we can see in here is an extreme use of non-chord tones. And if you'll just follow all the orange circled notes, you'll see how many non-chord tones are in here, and also of note how many of them occur on the strong beats so that it's disguising the harmony. A lot of them occur on beat 1 of the measure and so forth. So we see just a lot of non-chord tones throughout here. Some of my orange didn't translate here, but we have a lot of circled notes that are all non-chord tones. So we have a ton of them if you can just scan through there and see that. Also, we have voice leading driven harmony rather than functional driven harmony. So a lot of these harmonies are the result of voice leading that the composer was going after. For example, let's just take a look at this opening. If you'll take this alto note starting on F, follow it down to D, it moves down 1, 2, 3 half steps. If you'll take the soprano line starting on G sharp, you'll see it goes up 1, 2, 3 half steps. If you were to juxtapose that G sharp and put it on top of the F, this would be an exact mirror image of itself. As one voice moves one direction, the other voice moves in contrary motion to it. So this type of voice leading is perhaps why he started with G sharp here instead of A, to get this exact voice leading. If we look at the soprano line here, in going from G sharp up to B, we can see a voice exchange between the soprano and the tenor as the tenor moves from B to G sharp. And a voice exchange is where one voice trades with another voice in the subsequent chords. So for example, here we have a B in the tenor, which is taken by the soprano in the next bar, whereas the G sharp in the soprano is taken over by the tenor in the next bar. So they're essentially trading voices. And it's this kind of intricate detail is woven throughout this piece, where the voice leading is in many ways driving the harmony more so than the actual idea of trying to create functional progressions. Also, an interesting feature of this music and characteristic of the late Romantic is the increased use of chromaticism. If you just kind of scan through here, you'll see a lot of different chromatic sharps and flats throughout the piece. If you were to pull up a Mozart sonata or something like that, you're going to see also chromaticism, but not to this extent. And so this increased use of chromaticism was the path that Wagner was going down, and others would follow, Mahler and other composers, and Liszt and Chopin. Um, so this increased use of chromaticism will eventually take us to atonal music, as tonality eventually is unable to take it anymore, and the chromaticism increases to the point where the system completely loses tonal meaning. But at this point, we just see a saturation of chromaticism within a tonal context. We also see augmented chords in here, which represents an equal division of the octave. We see this 6 augmented chord happening a couple times. So this kind of equal division of the octave is another idea of this style, this time. Another thing to look at here are the direct modulations and the frequency of these direct modulations. These modulations from A minor to C minor to E minor, back to A minor, G major, C major. Here we have a common chord, but most of them are direct modulations. D minor, E minor, and the frequency at which they're occurring, oftentimes 2 bars apart. So this kind of quickly moving through the keys is a feature of this late Romanticism. Another thing is the keys that you're modulating to. We talked about the chromatic mediants. So the keys that are being modulated to are often not closely related, and which is the case here. We're moving through keys that are not closely related. A minor has no sharps or flats, and C minor has 3 flats, for example, and C minor goes to E minor, which has 1 sharp. So these are not closely related keys at all. Some of them are as we look through, but for example here, D minor has 1 flat, which moves to E minor, which has 1 sharp. So we have a lot of key relationships here, 1 sharp going to 3 sharps, and E minor to A major, and so forth. So these non-closely related keys, foreign keys, are characteristic of this style as well. And irregular phrasing would be another thing to look at. If we take a look here, we'll see that these phrases are occurring in different ways than what we traditionally would find in classical music with 4-bar regular phrasing. Here we have, in this opening, 3-bar phrases with big gaps. And so there's no real regular periodic phrase that you can expect. And as a matter of fact, these things get stretched out to the point where there is no ending to the phrase, often for pages of music. And this kind of stringing the listener along idea is what Wagner is doing here to mirror the idea of this unrequited love of the two characters of this opera. Lastly, I know there's more things here, but I just wanted to mention rhythmically, there's no regular accent here. We have an obscured metric accent where in 6/8 you would expect to feel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, we don't feel that. We don't sense that when we listen to this music. First of all, it's very slow, but even still, the metric accent is thwarted by all of these non-chord tones, and so the harmonic rhythm is difficult to discern when these chords are actually occurring. And so we just don't get a feel for the metric accent as we would in some other kinds of music. Well, these are many ways we can look at this piece as a representation of late Romanticism and how that these features began to take us toward atonality, as maybe one more step toward atonality. As the tonal center begins to be a little obscured, we don't really know what key we're in a lot of times, and we don't get a resolution to our dominance. And this increased chromaticism is eventually going to put a burden on the tonal system to the point that it doesn't have the ability to support it. And then in the 20th century, composers will start to write music with no tonal center at all. And then following that, um, we're going to have music that's intentionally written to deny a tonal center. So this is the Tristan Prelude and some of the ways that we can look at it as a representative of late Romanticism. And some composers would look at it as the end of Romanticism and the culmination of the harmonic practices of the 19th century.